Relationships are one of the most powerful arenas for personal growth. They bring out our deepest longings, our most vulnerable fears, and the parts of us that still hope to be loved exactly as we are. Yet many of us enter relationships carrying patterns from childhood, unspoken expectations, old wounds, and defensive habits that were necessary long ago, but limit us now. How to be an adult in relationships invites us to approach love with mindfulness and maturity. Instead of reacting from old conditioning, we learn to respond with awareness, compassion, and responsibility. The book centers on the idea that healthy love is built on 5 essential qualities: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing. These 5 A's represent what all humans need to feel safe and valued, and what we must practice ourselves to create nourishing, lasting connections. The heart of adult loving is presence, the ability to stay grounded, open, and honest even when emotions run high. This path requires courage to look inward, to communicate clearly, to set and honor boundaries, and to hold space for a partner's autonomy without losing our own. This work is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming conscious. When we practice mindful loving, we grow into the best versions of ourselves, more balanced, compassionate, and capable of real intimacy. Relationships then shift from being a source of anxiety or conflict to becoming a transformative journey, where 2 people support each other's evolution with respect and love. Chapter 1: The 5 A's, Foundations of Mindful Loving. Loving as an adult begins with a simple but profound truth. We cannot give what we do not know how to receive, and we cannot receive what we do not know how to recognize. Most of us grew up absorbing ideas about love from the people around us: parents, caregivers, teachers, early relationships, and from these experiences we formed expectations about how love works. Some of those lessons were healthy and supportive, others left holes, distortions, or patterns of fear. But becoming an adult in relationships means learning to distinguish what belongs to the past from what belongs to the present. It means approaching love not as a place to reenact old wounds, but as a conscious practice of presence. The 5 A's, attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, form the backbone of this practice. They are less a technique and more a way of being, a set of qualities that help us show up fully for ourselves and for the people we love. Each A meets a basic human need, and together they guide us toward relationships that are mature, grounded, intimate, and free from the unconscious grasping that creates suffering. Before exploring each A individually, it's important to understand why these 5 qualities matter. When the 5 A's are absent in childhood, a person becomes hyper-attuned to seeking them later. If we lacked consistent attention, we may hold an anxious need to be noticed. If acceptance was conditional, we may cling to perfectionism. If appreciation was scarce, we may constantly long for validation. And if affection or freedom, allowing, were given inconsistently, relationships may trigger fears of intimacy or fears of abandonment. But the good news is that the 5 A's can be practiced at any age. They are universal principles that reopen the door to secure connection, whether with a partner, a friend, or oneself. Their power lies not in perfection, but in practice. Mindful loving is learned moment by moment as we grow more aware of ourselves and more capable of relating with compassion. What follows is a deep exploration of each A, how it works, why it matters, and how it transforms our relationship with ourselves and others. Attention. Attention is the foundation of intimacy. It means truly seeing another person, noticing their words, their feelings, their shifts in mood, their inner world. It is the quality of presence that says, "You matter. I am here with you." Without attention, love feels hollow, because attention is the doorway through which connection passes. In childhood, attention is the nutrient that tells us we exist and are valued. Being held, listened to, and acknowledged gives us a sense of security. As adults, attention continues to shape our self-worth, though in more subtle ways. A partner who hears us, stays curious, and shows up emotionally creates an environment where vulnerability feels safe. Adult attention is mindful attention, not hypervigilance, not intrusive observation, not control. It is the gentle, steady focus that arises when we are present instead of distracted, when we listen without planning our reply, and when we observe without interpreting everything through old stories. It requires slowing down enough to sense what is happening inside another person and inside ourselves. Practicing attention means noticing when we drift away during a conversation, when we shut down emotionally, or when we assume we already know what the other person feels. It means choosing presence over distraction, curiosity over assumption, and kindness over defensiveness. In this way, attention becomes a spiritual practice, a moment-by-moment returning to reality, free from illusion or projection. Attention also reveals what is true. When we truly observe our partner, we see them not as an extension of our needs, but as a whole, separate human being. That clarity prevents us from using relationships as mirrors of insecurity. Instead, we engage from maturity. I see you as you are, and I meet you where you are. That is where adult intimacy begins. Acceptance. Acceptance is the natural companion to attention. While attention says, I see you, acceptance says, I welcome you as you are. Acceptance does not mean blind approval of harmful behaviors, nor does it require abandoning our boundaries. Instead, acceptance acknowledges the reality of another person's nature, history, preferences, and limitations. When we were children, we needed acceptance to feel safe in our own skin. If acceptance was conditional, given only when we behaved correctly, we may have learned to reshape ourselves to please others. This habit often follows us into adulthood, where we either contort ourselves to maintain harmony or expect others to conform to our desires. Both are traps that prevent true intimacy. Adult acceptance begins with the recognition that every person carries wounds, fears, habits, and protective layers. None of us is without flaws. Acceptance, therefore, becomes an act of compassion, a willingness to embrace imperfection without trying to sculpt another person into an ideal form. It is the understanding that love cannot be demanded or engineered into a particular shape. This does not mean we tolerate disrespect, betrayal, or emotional neglect. Acceptance is not submission. It is clarity. It is seeing the truth of who someone is right now, not their potential, not our fantasy, and choosing how to relate from a grounded place. Sometimes acceptance leads to deeper intimacy. Sometimes it leads to the wisdom to take space or leave. But in all cases, acceptance honors reality. Acceptance also applies to ourselves. Without self-acceptance, without acknowledging our own emotional patterns, fears, and vulnerabilities, we unconsciously project these onto our partners. What we deny in ourselves, we often resent in others. By accepting our own humanity, we free ourselves from shame and open the path to genuine connection. Ultimately, acceptance creates an atmosphere of emotional safety. In such an environment, people can relax, open up, and grow, not because they are pressured to change, but because they feel secure enough to evolve. Appreciation. Appreciation is the expression of gratitude, recognition, and encouragement. It is the acknowledgement of the good we see in another person, the value they bring, and the ways they enrich our lives. Appreciation nourishes relationships like sunlight nourishes plants. What is appreciated tends to thrive. In childhood, appreciation helps build confidence. Children who are seen for their efforts, their unique qualities, and their moments of kindness grow into adults who trust their worth. Without appreciation, we may learn to seek validation endlessly, or we may struggle to believe compliments later in life. In adult relationships, appreciation strengthens the bond between partners. It counters the natural tendency to take each other for granted and keeps the relationship alive with positive energy. Simple expressions, thank you, I love how you handled that, I'm grateful you're here, I notice how hard you're trying, have a profound impact because they remind us that our existence touches someone else. Appreciation also transforms conflict. When we maintain a baseline of gratitude, disagreements feel less threatening. We remember that the relationship is a place of goodwill, even when challenges arise. Appreciation softens harshness, opens hearts, and makes repair easier. At its deepest level, appreciation means seeing the gifts within a partner's differences, not just the comfort of their similarities. It is recognizing that the qualities that challenge us often teach us the most. A partner's independence may push us to grow more secure. Their emotional depth may encourage us to be more vulnerable. Their need for structure may help us become more grounded. Through appreciation, differences become assets rather than obstacles. We also practice appreciation with ourselves. When we acknowledge our progress, our courage, or our efforts, we build resilience. Self-appreciation quiets the inner critic and makes it easier to give and receive love without fear. Affection. Affection is the warmth of love expressed physically, verbally, or energetically. It is the softening of the heart that says, "I care for you," not simply through words but through tone, body language, kindness, and presence. Affection includes touch, but it also includes emotional tenderness, gentleness, empathy, and the willingness to be soft with someone we trust. In childhood, affection teaches us that love is safe. The embrace of a caregiver, a soothing voice, or a loving gaze wires the nervous system for connection. Without consistent affection, we may grow up feeling uneasy with closeness, afraid of intimacy, or unsure how to comfort ourselves or others. In adulthood, affection is one of the clearest signals of connection. It is the physical and emotional glue that helps relationships thrive. Affection doesn't have to be grand or constant. Small gestures often matter most. Holding hands, leaning into a hug, a warm smile, a gentle reply, a softening of the eyes, a quiet moment of kindness. What makes affection mature is its grounding in consent, attunement, and respect. Adult affection respects boundaries and recognizes that comfort levels differ. It does not demand closeness, it invites it. It does not cling, it welcomes. It does not overwhelm, it supports. Affection also includes the ability to soothe and be soothed. Mature affection means offering comfort without losing ourselves and receiving comfort without shame. It is the courage to lean into connection instead of withdrawing behind emotional armor. Ultimately, affection is not only a behavior, but a state of being. It is the willingness to remain open-hearted even when we are vulnerable, even when we fear rejection. In this way, affection becomes both an offering and a practice of healing. Allowing. Allowing is the spaciousness of love, the freedom to be oneself without pressure, restriction, or manipulation. It means giving others room to grow, explore, make mistakes, and express their truth. Allowing is the opposite of control. It trusts the natural unfolding of relationship and honors each person's autonomy. In childhood, allowing shows up as freedom to explore, express feelings, and develop preferences without shame or coercion. When this freedom is denied, we may grow into adults who fear expressing our true selves or feel compelled to control others to maintain safety. In adult relationships, allowing is one of the most mature forms of love. It respects the individuality of each partner. It understands that love is not possession. It is a partnership between two whole beings. Allowing means we do not try to reshape another person's personality, limit their dreams, or dictate their choices. We offer support, honesty, and boundaries, but we do not impose our will. Allowing also means releasing expectations that love must follow a specific script. People change over time, relationships evolve. Allowing embraces that evolution instead of resisting it. This creates a dynamic, living bond instead of a rigid one. But allowing does not mean passivity. It includes the courage to speak our needs, express our feelings, and uphold our boundaries. Allowing others space does not require abandoning ourselves. Instead, it creates a relationship where both partners can breathe, grow, and remain authentic. At its core, allowing is trust. Trust in ourselves, trust in our partner, and trust in the natural intelligence of love. When we stop gripping, love flows more freely. When we stop controlling, intimacy deepens. When we allow, connection becomes a choice rather than an obligation. Though each A stands alone, they become most powerful when practiced together. Attention without acceptance feels scrutinizing. Acceptance without appreciation can feel indifferent. Appreciation without affection may seem distant. Affection without allowing becomes smothering. Allowing without attention may feel like emotional absence. Together, they form a balanced ecosystem of love, an environment where two people can grow both individually and together. Most importantly, the 5 A's begin within. When we give ourselves attention, we notice our feelings. When we offer ourselves acceptance, we stop waging war against our own humanity. When we appreciate ourselves, we stop seeking external validation. When we show ourselves affection, we soften. And when we allow ourselves space to grow, we stop living in fear of imperfection. A relationship between two self-aware adults becomes a place of mutual nourishment, not mutual dependency. A place of support, not suffocation. A place of honesty, not projection. Practicing the 5 A's does not eliminate conflict or hardship. Love will always contain challenges. But it gives us the tools to move through those challenges with integrity, courage, and compassion. As we continue in the chapters ahead, the 5 A's will serve as our compass, guiding us toward relationships rooted not in unconscious patterns or childhood longing, but in the clarity and presence of mature, mindful love. Chapter 2. The 5 A's in Childhood and Adulthood. The ways we love as adults did not appear out of nowhere. They were shaped quietly, long before we had language for emotions or awareness of patterns. Our earliest experiences with caregivers taught us what to expect from connection, what to fear in closeness, and what we believed we had to do to be loved. These early emotional lessons sink deeply into the nervous system. They influence how we interpret tone, how much closeness we can tolerate, how we respond to conflict, and how safe we feel expressing needs. When the 5 A's, attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, are present in childhood, they form the foundation for secure, confident, and open-hearted relating. When any of them are inconsistent or missing, we grow into adulthood carrying unmet needs that quietly steer our relationships until we become conscious of them. For a child, attention is not simply being looked at, it is being emotionally noticed. It is the sense that someone is attuned enough to see their inner world. Acceptance teaches a child that it is safe to be who they are without performing or pleasing. Appreciation teaches them that their existence brings joy, not burden. Affection teaches the body that closeness is warm and safe, not confusing or dangerous. Allowing teaches the child they have room to explore, express, and develop individuality. When these gestures are present consistently, the child internalizes a sense of worth and safety. They grow into adults who can offer the 5 A's naturally because those gestures live within them. But most people grow up with some combination of gaps. A parent may have been loving but distracted, present but critical, affectionate but controlling, accepting but inconsistent. Childhood does not need to be traumatic to leave emotional imprints. Even mild patterns can shape relational habits that appear later. When attention was inconsistent, the adult may fear abandonment or feel invisible. When acceptance was conditional, the adult may shapeshift to avoid conflict or rejection. When appreciation was rare, the adult may feel disposable, easily replaced, or unworthy. When affection was withdrawn or confusing, the adult may struggle with intimacy or overvalue physical closeness as proof of love. When allowing was absent, the adult may feel guilty for having boundaries or ashamed of their individuality. These patterns are powerful because they form before we have the ability to question them. As children, we absorb the emotional climate of the home as the definition of love itself. The nervous system treats familiar patterns as safe, even when they are unhealthy. This early conditioning explains why so many adults find themselves drawn to relationships that echo the dynamics of their childhood. This repetition is not a conscious choice, but a psychological phenomenon known as repetition compulsion. The mind recreates what it could not resolve. It pulls us towards situations that feel familiar, hoping unconsciously to rewrite the ending. Repetition compulsion shows up in subtle ways. A person who grew up with emotionally distant caregivers may continually seek out partners who are unavailable, believing that if they can finally get someone distant to love them, they will heal the original wound. A person who had a critical parent may be drawn toward partners who are difficult to please, believing that earning approval will finally affirm their worth. Someone raised with unpredictability may choose partners who generate emotional chaos, associating intensity with connection. Those who grew up with controlling caregivers may end up in relationships where they feel monitored or restricted, repeating the dynamic because it feels like home. The pull toward familiarity is strong, even when the conscious mind knows better. The body recognizes the emotional pattern long before the intellect has time to intervene. This is why someone might say, "I know this relationship isn't good for me," yet still feel deeply attached. The inner child is hoping that this time, the ending will be different. That this time, the love they longed for will finally arrive. But relationships formed from childhood wounds often replay the same pain until we become aware of what we are reenacting. Becoming conscious of these patterns is the first step toward transformation. Awareness allows us to pause long enough to see the emotional chain reaction rather than collapsing into it. When we feel triggered by silence, by tone, by conflict, by a change in routine, it is rarely the adult who is reacting first. It is the child inside who remembers. The body responds as if an old threat has returned. The heart races, the stomach tightens, the mind leaps to fear. These reactions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of old wounds asking for care. Triggers reveal what is unresolved. They show us where the 5 A's were missing in childhood and where we must now offer them to ourselves. When someone's neutral comment feels like criticism, it may point to a childhood lack of acceptance. When someone's busyness feels like abandonment, it may point to a lack of consistent attention. When someone's boundary feels like rejection, it may point to a lack of appreciation or affection. When someone's independence feels threatening, it may point to a childhood environment where individuality was not allowed. In this sense, conflicts and triggers become opportunities for self-awareness. Projections are another way childhood experiences shape adult relationships. A projection occurs when we attribute our own fears, expectations, or past experiences onto the present situation. Instead of seeing the partner clearly, we see them through the lens of history. A partner who needs space may be misinterpreted as uncaring because a parent was cold or distant. A partner who expresses irritation may be perceived as rejecting because a caregiver was critical. A partner who sets boundaries may be seen as controlling because of earlier restrictions. These interpretations happen automatically because the nervous system responds to patterns, not to individuals. Becoming aware of projections allows us to differentiate the past from the present. Instead of assuming our partner's behavior means what it once meant, we can pause and ask, what am I actually reacting to? Is this moment triggering an old memory or fear? What is the story my mind is creating, and does it match the reality in front of me? This awareness breaks the automatic cycle and creates space for mature response. Reparenting, the process of offering the 5 A's to our own inner child, is the path to healing these patterns. Reparenting does not mean rejecting our past or blaming our caregivers. It means recognizing the unmet needs within us and taking responsibility for meeting them now. Through mindful awareness, we learn to sit with our emotional responses rather than collapsing into them. We learn to comfort ourselves when old wounds surface. We learn to speak to ourselves with acceptance instead of criticism. We learn to appreciate our strengths rather than dismissing them. We learn to give affection to ourselves in the form of gentleness, rest, and compassion. We learn to allow ourselves to grow, to make mistakes, and to choose relationships that align with our worth. Mindfulness is the foundation of reparenting because it keeps us present with our inner experience without judgment. When a trigger arises, instead of reacting outwardly or shutting down inwardly, we observe. I notice tension in my chest. I notice fear. I notice the impulse to withdraw or chase. These observations do not suppress emotion, they illuminate it. Mindfulness allows us to respond with the 5 A's internally, giving ourselves attention, accepting the emotion rather than fighting it, appreciating our awareness, offering affectionate self-talk, and allowing the emotion to move through us naturally. As we reparent ourselves, we reduce the unconscious pressure we place on our partners to meet every unmet childhood need. The relationship becomes lighter, less reactive, and more grounded. We can offer the 5 A's to our partner not from desperation, but from wholeness. We can receive love without suspicion. We can connect without fear of losing ourselves. And we can choose relationships that reflect our healed self rather than our wounded one. Ultimately, understanding the role of the 5 A's in childhood and adulthood frees us from repeating the past. It helps us create love that is intentional rather than reactive, conscious rather than habitual. By becoming aware of our patterns, becoming compassionate toward our triggers, and becoming responsible for our healing, we transform the way we love. We become adults who can give and receive the 5 A's with authenticity, depth, and maturity, creating relationships that nurture both partners and honor the truth of who we are. Chapter 3: The Ego, Fear, and the Inner Child. Every relationship is shaped by 3 forces inside each of us: the ego that wants control, the fear that wants protection, and the inner child that wants reassurance. These forces operate quietly, often beneath awareness, yet they influence how we interpret our partner's words, how we respond to conflict, and how deeply we allow ourselves to love. Understanding these parts of ourselves is essential for becoming an adult in relationships, because these are the very forces that pull us away from presence and into old patterns. The ego develops early, not as a flaw, but as a shield. It is the part of the mind that decides who we need to be in order to stay safe, accepted, or valued. It carries rules inherited from childhood, rules about emotion, vulnerability, love, and power. The ego tells us not to show weakness, not to ask for too much, not to trust too easily, or not to risk being hurt. In this way, it tries to protect us, yet the protection it offers often comes at the cost of connection. In relationships, the ego does not announce itself loudly. It appears in subtle reactions. It may show up as defensiveness when we feel questioned, irritation when we feel misunderstood, or withdrawal when we feel exposed. It may insist we must win an argument, or that being vulnerable is dangerous, or that we should never need anyone. The ego believes it is guarding us, but in truth it stands between us and intimacy, building walls where we long for bridges. Fear sits underneath the ego, fueling it. Fear is the emotion that rises when something touches an old wound, even if the present moment carries no real threat. Perhaps a partner's quietness stirs fear of abandonment. Perhaps their frustration echoes a past caregiver's anger. Perhaps their need for space reminds us of an old rejection. Fear reacts instantly, often before thought has time to intervene. This is why relationships can feel overwhelming at times, because the heart does not always know how to distinguish the past from the present. Fear takes many forms. It can appear as jealousy, anger, numbness, overthinking, or control. It can make us cling tightly or push someone away. It can make love feel risky, even when our partner is kind and committed. Most destructive behaviors in relationships are driven not by malice, but by fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of being too much, fear of losing someone, or fear of losing oneself. Beneath both ego and fear lies the inner child, the emotional core formed in our earliest years. The inner child carries our original needs for attention, safety, affection, acceptance, and freedom. When these needs were inconsistently met, the child inside us learned to cope in whatever ways were possible. Some learned to become invisible, some to become perfect, some to become helpful, some to become emotionally quiet, and some to become fiercely independent. These strategies were intelligent at the time. They kept us connected to the people we depended on. But now, as adults, these strategies can limit our capacity for healthy connection. The inner child reacts quickly and instinctively. When triggered, we may feel small, overwhelmed, or powerless without understanding why. A partner's comment might stir shame. A minor conflict might evoke panic. Even if we appear calm on the outside, the child within us may be pleading for safety or validation. When this child runs the relationship, interactions become confusing because we are not responding from our adult self, but from a much younger part of us. Healing begins with recognizing these dynamics with compassion rather than judgment. The ego is not the enemy. It is a protector that has outlived its original purpose. Fear is not weakness. It is a signal that something tender within us needs attention. The inner child is not a burden. It is a part of us longing to be heard and comforted. When we approach these parts of ourselves with understanding, they begin to lose their intensity. Awareness itself becomes healing. In relationships, learning to recognize when the inner child is activated is transformative. When we feel suddenly overwhelmed, suspicious, clingy, distant, or angry, it helps to pause and quietly ask ourselves, how old do I feel right now? This simple question often reveals that the emotion is not about the present partner, but about a much earlier experience. By acknowledging this, we shift from reactivity to reflection. We stop expecting our partner to fill a childhood need they never caused. Instead, we begin to repair in ourselves, offering the inner child the reassurance, boundaries, or comfort they lacked. Partners who cultivate awareness can support each other gently. When we know our partner's triggers are tied to old wounds, we become less defensive and more compassionate. Instead of taking their fear personally, we can respond with steadiness. Instead of reacting to their withdrawal, we can offer space without interpreting it as rejection. Instead of assuming the worst, we can ask open, calm questions that invite clarity rather than escalation. Communication becomes more honest when fear and ego are understood. Instead of saying, "You never listen," we may say, "I feel scared that my voice doesn't matter." Instead of saying, "You're pulling away," we may say, "Something in me gets afraid when you get quiet." These kinds of statements come from the adult self, not the wounded self. They reveal deeper truths and invite tenderness. They turn arguments into conversations and disconnection into connection. In this way, relationships become powerful stages for healing. They give the inner child new experiences of being heard, respected, valued, and supported. Each time we remain present through a trigger, we rewrite the emotional patterns of the past. Each time we soothe fear with awareness, the ego loosens its grip. Each time we communicate vulnerably, intimacy deepens. An adult relationship is not one where old wounds disappear, but one where they can be brought into the light without shame. It is a relationship where two people learn to distinguish between the past and the present, where they help each other grow, and where they understand that emotional reactions are not flaws but reflections of a long journey toward wholeness. The more we embrace the ego, fear, and inner child with gentle awareness, the more space we create for love to flourish with freedom rather than fear, with understanding rather than defensiveness, and with presence rather than protection. In this way, the relationship becomes not only a place of connection but a path toward becoming a more grounded, compassionate, and mature version of ourselves. Chapter 4. Commitment and Responsibility. Commitment in an adult relationship is not a promise to avoid conflict, nor is it a guarantee that love will always feel easy. Instead, commitment is the steady choice to remain present, honest, and engaged even when difficulties arise. It is the willingness to show up with the best of ourselves while also taking responsibility for the parts that still need healing. Responsibility, in this sense, is not a burden but a freedom, the freedom to shape the relationship consciously rather than being driven by old patterns or unexamined impulses. Many people think of commitment as a fixed state, as if saying yes once means the work is done. But real commitment is dynamic. It evolves as both partners grow, as circumstances change, and as new layers of vulnerability emerge. What remains constant is the intention, to support each other's growth, to communicate with honesty, and to navigate challenges with maturity rather than retreating into defensiveness or avoidance. At its core, responsibility in relationships means acknowledging that our reactions, emotions, and needs belong to us. It means understanding that although a partner may influence how we feel, they are not the source of our inner world. Our feelings arise from layers of history, memory, temperament, and expectation. When we take responsibility for these feelings, we create space for dialogue instead of blame. We can say, "This is what is happening inside me," rather than accusing someone of causing it. This approach shifts the dynamic profoundly. Instead of becoming entangled in cycles of "you did this" or "you made me feel that," the relationship becomes a collaboration where each person explores their inner experience and seeks understanding. Responsibility invites curiosity. It encourages us to ask ourselves why we feel triggered, why certain behaviors unsettle us, why certain needs feel urgent. Instead of assuming our partner's actions are harmful or intentional, we look inward to understand the roots of our reactions. Commitment also involves the willingness to repair. No matter how loving or aware two people are, misunderstandings will happen. Words will be spoken in haste. Emotions will flare. The difference between relationships that flourish and those that deteriorate lies not in the absence of conflict, but in the presence of repair. Repair means acknowledging hurt without defensiveness, apologizing without justification, and seeking to understand rather than to win. It means valuing the relationship more than being right. In an adult relationship, both partners become responsible for the emotional climate they create. This does not mean suppressing feelings to keep peace. It means expressing them in ways that foster connection rather than rupture. Responsibility is not self-sacrifice. It is not taking blame for everything or carrying the emotional load of both people. Instead, it is the recognition that how we show up, our tone, our honesty, our availability, our boundaries, shapes the space between us. Boundaries are an essential part of responsibility. They protect the integrity of each person so that love can remain healthy rather than fused or dependent. When boundaries are respected, both partners feel secure enough to express their true selves. When boundaries are violated or ignored, resentment grows. The responsibility of setting and upholding boundaries belongs to each individual. The responsibility of honoring those boundaries belongs to both. Commitment without boundaries becomes enmeshment. Boundaries without commitment become distance. The harmony between the two allows love to be both grounded and free. Responsibility also means tending to our own needs instead of expecting a partner to fulfill them automatically. While relationships offer profound support, they are not meant to replace self-awareness, self-regulation, or self-care. When we rely too heavily on a partner to soothe our insecurities, validate our worth, or manage our emotions, the relationship becomes strained. Instead, adult loving involves learning how to comfort ourselves, how to stay anchored when triggered, and how to communicate needs without demand or urgency. A partner can support us, but they cannot heal wounds we refuse to face. Responsibility means recognizing the difference between a request for connection and a demand for rescue. It means bringing our whole selves, not our unhealed selves alone, to the partnership. In this way, both people contribute to the emotional stability of the relationship rather than leaning on each other to compensate for unresolved pain. Commitment also requires a willingness to grow. Many relationships begin with the hope that the other person will stay the same, that the comfort of early connection will last unchanged. But growth is inevitable. Life demands it. People shift, evolve, face new challenges, discover new parts of themselves. Commitment is the agreement to adapt alongside each other, not to hold each other hostage to an outdated version of the relationship, but to remain open to what the partnership becomes as each person matures. This kind of growth asks for honesty. It requires speaking truthfully about desires, fears, dreams, and disappointments. It means not hiding parts of ourselves because we fear they will disrupt the relationship. Commitment rooted in stagnation becomes fragile because it relies on avoidance. Commitment rooted in truth becomes resilient because it welcomes authenticity. One of the most profound acts of responsibility is learning to pause. In moments of tension, our first impulse is rarely our wisest. The instinct to defend, attack, or withdraw often arises from old wounds rather than present understanding. But if we can pause, take a breath, step back emotionally, or simply give ourselves a moment to settle, we allow the adult within us to respond rather than the child or the ego. This pause creates the space for patience, clarity, and compassion. Responsibility also means being reliable. This does not imply perfection, but consistency. When our words align with our actions, trust grows. When we follow through on what we say, when we keep our promises, when we show up when we are needed, the relationship becomes a source of stability. Reliability builds emotional safety, which in turn allows vulnerability to deepen. Ultimately, commitment and responsibility form the foundation on which all other aspects of love rest. Without them, attention becomes inconsistent, acceptance becomes conditional, appreciation becomes rare, affection becomes fragile, and allowing becomes chaotic. With them, the relationship becomes a haven, not because life is without challenges, but because both people are grounded enough to navigate those challenges as a team. Adult loving is not about perfection, it is about presence. It is the ongoing choice to return to connection even when fear arises. It is the willingness to own our part, repair our mistakes, and nurture the bond with sincerity and effort. Commitment is not a chain but a path. Responsibility is not a weight but a guide. Together, they create a relationship capable of evolving with grace, depth, and resilience. Chapter 5. Healthy Boundaries. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood elements of a healthy relationship. Many people imagine that setting boundaries means creating distance or withholding love. Others believe that boundaries will lead to conflict or rejection, so they avoid setting them altogether. Yet true boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges. They protect the connection by ensuring that both people feel safe, respected, and free to remain themselves. Without boundaries, intimacy collapses under the weight of confusion, resentment, or emotional fusion. Healthy boundaries begin with a clear understanding of our own emotional landscape. What feels supportive, what feels harmful, what nourishes us, and what drains us. Most of us were not taught how to identify these feelings. As children, our boundaries were often shaped by the needs, moods, or limitations of the adults around us. Some learned to suppress their needs to maintain peace. Others learned to overextend themselves to gain approval. Some learned that saying no was dangerous. Others learned that love required constant availability. As adults, these early lessons shape how we show up in relationships. A person who learns self-sacrifice may feel guilty whenever they assert a need. Someone who learned emotional independence may resist closeness even when longing for it. Setting boundaries becomes difficult because the old conditioning whispers fears. You will upset them. You will be abandoned. You don't deserve that. You will seem selfish, or you shouldn't need anything. These fears keep people quiet, even when something inside them knows a limit has been crossed. Healthy boundaries require unlearning these fears and returning to a simple but profound truth. We are allowed to protect our well-being. We are allowed to say no, to take space, to have preferences, to express needs, and to ask for behavior that supports the relationship rather than harms it. Boundaries are not an act of rejection. They are an act of self-respect. And when practiced with care, they become an act of respect for the relationship as well. One of the central misunderstandings about boundaries is the belief that they are demands for someone else to change. In reality, boundaries are statements of what we will do to care for ourselves. They do not force behavior. They communicate consequences and choices. Instead of saying, "You must stop talking to me that way," a boundary says, "If our conversation becomes hurtful, I will step away until we can speak respectfully." Instead of saying, "You can't go out without telling me," a boundary says, "I feel anxious when plans change unexpectedly. I need communication to feel secure." Boundaries empower both people by clarifying what supports connection and what undermines it. Healthy boundaries also require consistency. It is not enough to express a limit. We must uphold it with compassion and steadiness. When boundaries are stated but not maintained, confusion arises. The other person does not know where the line is because the line keeps shifting. The purpose of boundaries is not punishment, but clarity. Clarity brings stability, and stability builds trust. One of the challenges of boundaries is that they often trigger discomfort, not only within us, but within the person receiving them. If someone is used to taking more than we can give, our boundary may feel like rejection to them. If someone is used to caretaking or overfunctioning, our boundary may feel like a shift in the familiar dynamic. That discomfort does not mean the boundary is wrong. It means the relationship is adjusting. Growth almost always brings temporary unease before it brings deeper harmony. In mature relationships, boundaries are not seen as insults, but as expressions of truth. They become a way of saying, I want us to thrive, and this is what I need to feel safe, grounded, and connected. When both partners respect each other's boundaries, connection feels freer, not tighter. There is no fear of losing oneself or being consumed by the other. Instead, the relationship becomes a space where individuality is supported rather than threatened. Boundaries also help us differentiate between supporting someone and carrying their emotional load. In unhealthy dynamics, one partner may assume responsibility for the other's feelings, reactions, or choices. They may try to fix everything, soothe every discomfort, or prevent every conflict. This may feel like love, but it creates imbalance. It leaves one person exhausted and the other underdeveloped. Healthy boundaries restore balance by clarifying what each person is responsible for. Emotions can be shared, but they cannot be managed entirely by one partner. Support is offered, but autonomy is respected. Self-worth plays a large role in boundary setting. When we believe we deserve respect, care, and consideration, boundaries feel natural. When our self-worth is shaky, asserting boundaries can feel frightening. We may tolerate behavior that hurts us because we fear that asking for more will drive someone away. But boundaries rooted in shame create unstable relationships because the connection must constantly adjust around unspoken pain. Boundaries rooted in self-respect create relationships that can withstand honesty. Another important aspect of boundaries is learning to tolerate the emotions that arise when we set them. Saying no may bring guilt. Taking space may bring anxiety. Asking for what we need may stir fear of conflict. These emotions are natural, especially when boundaries are new. But the more we practice tolerating these feelings, the stronger and clearer our boundaries become. Emotional resilience grows when we choose alignment over avoidance, truth over comfort, and integrity over appeasement. Ultimately, healthy boundaries allow love to be a choice rather than an obligation. When two people know they are free to express themselves authentically, the relationship becomes spacious instead of constricting. Openness becomes safer. Vulnerability becomes easier. Each partner remains connected to themselves while remaining connected to each other. This creates a relationship where intimacy can deepen without fear of enmeshment and where individuality can flourish without fear of abandonment. Boundaries are not the end of love. They are the conditions in which love can truly thrive. They protect dignity, preserve trust, and create a foundation where two adults can relate with maturity rather than reenacting old wounds. When practiced with compassion and consistency, boundaries transform relationships from fragile to resilient, from reactive to intentional, and from fearful to deeply fulfilling. Chapter 6. Mindfulness and Loving Presence. Mindfulness in relationships is often mistaken for calmness, politeness, or emotional restraint. But mindfulness is not about appearing composed. It is about being awake to what is happening inside us and between us. Loving presence arises when we bring this awareness into our interactions, when we meet ourselves and our partner with openness rather than reactivity, with attention rather than assumption, and with care rather than fear. This kind of presence is one of the most transformative forces in a relationship because it allows two people to connect without the distortions of ego or old emotional patterns. To be mindful is to stay connected to the present moment. Yet the present moment is rarely where our minds naturally live. We slip into the past when triggers arise, and we project into the future when uncertainty appears. The mind constantly evaluates, predicts, compares, or prepares. Without awareness, we respond to our partner through reflex rather than choice. A comment becomes a threat because it resembles an old wound. A pause becomes rejection because of a past abandonment. A disagreement becomes a warning of future disaster. When awareness is absent, the relationship becomes clouded by stories that have little to do with the reality in front of us. Mindfulness interrupts these automatic reactions. It allows us to pause long enough to recognize the difference between what is occurring and what we are imagining. It helps us see that a racing heart does not mean danger, that discomfort does not mean disconnection, that a difficult moment does not define the relationship. Loving presence grows from this clarity. It is the ability to stay receptive and grounded even when emotions surge. It is the choice to respond instead of react, to understand rather than defend, to listen rather than prepare a counterargument. Mindfulness begins with awareness of our internal world, sensations, emotions, thoughts, and impulses. When we feel triggered, instead of being swept away by the intensity, we notice the physical signals, the tightening chest, the shallow breath, the warm flush of anger, the heaviness of sadness. These sensations are not signs of danger, they are signs of aliveness. Observing them does not suppress emotion, it illuminates it. This presence makes us less likely to lash out or withdraw because we are no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. Instead, we become aware of the wounded parts of us that need care. Loving presence is also the willingness to stay open-hearted even when our ego wants to close. It means holding our reactions with gentleness rather than judgment. When we can observe our fear or frustration without collapsing into it, we bring compassion to the moment. This compassion softens our tone, eases tension, and makes room for our partner to feel safe. Presence invites presence. When we show up authentically and calmly, the other person feels no need to protect themselves. They, too, can relax into honesty. Mindfulness in relationships also involves deep listening. Listening is not simply hearing words. It is sensing the emotion beneath them, the longing behind them, the meaning within them. When we listen with presence, we stop preparing answers or defenses. We give our full attention. This kind of listening communicates more than agreement. It communicates care. It says, "You matter enough for me to pause my own world and enter yours." When both partners listen this way, understanding deepens naturally. Presence also transforms the quality of our speech. Instead of speaking from urgency or anger, we speak from awareness. Instead of reacting to assumptions, we speak from what is true in the moment. Words become softer, clearer, and more precise. We express needs and fears without blame. We share truth without aggression. Loving presence turns communication into a bridge rather than a battleground. Another dimension of mindfulness is recognizing when we are no longer present. Everyone loses presence at times. Stress, exhaustion, insecurity, or distraction can pull us away from the moment. The important thing is not perfection, but return. When we realize we have become reactive, closed, or disconnected, we can pause and come back. We can take a breath, soften the body, and remind ourselves that the present moment is the only place where love can exist. Mindfulness also helps us see our partner more clearly. Without presence, we may interpret their behavior through the lens of old fears or unmet needs. With presence, we see their humanity, their own wounds, hopes, struggles, and longings. We realize they are not attacking us when they are stressed. They are simply overwhelmed. They are not withdrawing because they do not love us. They may be afraid of conflict or unsure how to express themselves. Presence turns judgment into understanding, and understanding turns distance into closeness. Loving presence does not guarantee harmony at all times. There will still be disagreements, frustrations, and misunderstandings. But with mindfulness, these moments become less threatening. We learn to stay with discomfort rather than escaping it. We understand that conflict does not mean collapse, and that pain does not mean we are unsafe. Presence allows the heart to remain open even when emotions are turbulent. This resilience is what deepens intimacy over time. Mindfulness expands beyond conflict. It enhances the small, quiet moments that often go unnoticed. The way your partner laughs, the warmth of their hand, the comfort of shared silence, the subtle gestures of care. When we are present, these moments become sources of joy rather than fleeting details. Gratitude grows naturally because the mind is no longer wandering, it is paying attention. And where gratitude grows, love flourishes. Loving presence also means being mindful of ourselves, not just our partner. It means knowing when we are depleted and need rest. It means noticing when we are losing our center and need a pause. Caring for ourselves is not selfish, it is essential. Without self-awareness, we bring our exhaustion into the relationship and expect the other person to compensate. With mindfulness, we take responsibility for our own well-being, which allows us to give and receive love with clarity rather than resentment. Ultimately, mindfulness and loving presence allow a relationship to become a place of truth rather than performance. Both people can show their real selves because presence makes honesty safe. The relationship becomes grounded not in fantasy or fear, but in a steady, conscious connection. Love becomes less about trying to control outcomes and more about showing up fully in each unfolding moment. Presence is the heart of adult love. It tempers the ego, soothes fear, supports boundaries, and deepens connection. It turns relationships into living, breathing partnerships that grow richer with time. When two people commit to mindful presence, they create a love that is not fragile or reactive, but resilient, spacious, and profoundly intimate. Chapter 7. Healing Wounds and Cultivating Emotional Safety. Every relationship carries within it two histories, the history of the partnership and the personal histories of each partner. These personal histories, filled with experiences of care, neglect, love, misunderstanding, protection, or pain, shape how we feel, react, and interpret the present. The wounds from these histories do not disappear simply because we fall in love. If anything, intimacy draws them closer to the surface. In a safe and mature relationship, this resurfacing becomes an opportunity for healing rather than a source of fear. Healing begins with awareness. Many people replay old emotional patterns without realizing they are doing so. They may become anxious when someone pulls away because in childhood distance meant danger. They may become controlling because unpredictability once caused pain. They may retreat emotionally because expressing needs was once met with dismissal. They may interpret a neutral tone as criticism because they carry the memory of being judged. These wounds shape our nervous system, training it to anticipate harm even when the present moment is safe. Recognizing these patterns is not about blaming our past or labeling ourselves as wounded. It is about understanding why our reactions sometimes feel larger than the situation. When we understand that our emotional responses are echoes rather than accurate assessments, we become less reactive and more curious. Instead of lashing out, we pause. Instead of collapsing into fear, we breathe. Instead of assuming our partner is the source of old pain, we recognize that the relationship is revealing what still needs care. Emotional safety is created when both partners feel they can show their inner worlds, fears, insecurities, needs, and desires, without being shamed, dismissed, or punished. Safety does not mean comfort at all times. It means permission to be authentic. It means that vulnerability is welcomed rather than judged. It means that difficult conversations can unfold without fear of abandonment or retaliation. When two people cultivate this kind of safety, healing becomes not only possible, but inevitable. Healing in relationship requires gentleness. Old wounds do not respond to pressure, correction, or logic. They soften through empathy. When someone reveals a fear, they are not asking to be fixed. They are asking to be understood. When they express insecurity, they are not seeking proof. They are seeking presence. When they speak about pain, they are not trying to relive it. They are trusting us with something tender. Emotional safety grows when these moments are met with patience, not impatience, with compassion, not analysis. Responsiveness is one of the greatest gifts we can offer each other. When one partner reaches out emotionally, the other's ability to respond with warmth and steadiness communicates, "You matter. I am here. You are not alone." This responsiveness rewires old beliefs formed in childhood, beliefs that the world is unsafe, that love is conditional, or that vulnerability will lead to hurt. With each caring response, those beliefs weaken. With each moment of compassion, the emotional nervous system learns a new pattern. Connection is safe. Of course, both partners carry wounds, and both will have moments when they lose their center. No one remains perfectly present at all times. Emotional safety does not require that we avoid mistakes. It requires that we repair them. Repair is an act of healing that acknowledges impact without defensiveness. It demonstrates maturity and responsibility. When a rupture occurs, a harsh word, a misunderstood comment, a moment of withdrawal, the willingness to repair brings the relationship back into alignment. These moments of rupture and repair actually deepen trust because they prove that the relationship can withstand imperfection. Healing also involves owning our triggers. While our partner can support us, they cannot take responsibility for the wounds they did not cause. Our triggers are signals from within, not accusations from without. When we take responsibility for understanding our own emotional responses, we give the relationship space to breathe. Instead of saying, "You made me feel this way," we can say, "Something in me feels activated, and I want to explore what it's connected to." This shift creates emotional maturity and prevents blame from overtaking the relationship. Equally important is learning to soothe ourselves. Even with the most loving partner, there will be moments when they cannot meet every emotional need instantly. Self-soothing does not mean shutting out connection. It means supporting ourselves while remaining open to connection. It means learning how to calm our body, breathe through anxiety, or sit with sadness without spiraling. This inner stability allows us to engage in the relationship with clarity rather than desperation. Emotional safety also grows through transparency. We cultivate trust when we share our intentions, clarify our needs, and communicate early rather than waiting for resentment. When partners are transparent about their feelings and desires, misunderstandings lose their power. Problems become shared challenges rather than hidden tensions. Openness becomes the natural language of the relationship. Healing also asks us to be patient with our own process and our partners. Emotional wounds rarely heal on a predictable timeline. Some days they feel distant, and other days they feel fresh again. The path is not linear. What matters is not the pace, but the direction. Moving gently toward connection, choosing honesty over avoidance, and valuing repair over perfection. All of these steps create a healing environment. One of the most profound elements of emotional safety is the freedom to be imperfect. When we no longer fear being judged for our flaws, we relax into authenticity. We stop performing. We stop guarding. We stop trying to be someone who will never disappoint. This freedom allows intimacy to deepen because the relationship becomes a place of refuge, a place where we can be both strong and vulnerable, both confident and unsure, both growing and struggling. Healing wounds in relationship ultimately transforms love from something fragile into something resilient. It changes the emotional nervous system from reactive to responsive. It shifts the partnership from fear-driven to trust-based. When emotional safety is cultivated intentionally, the relationship becomes a container that can hold joy, pain, growth, uncertainty, and evolution without collapsing. A relationship is not healed by avoiding conflict, but by meeting conflict with awareness and care. It is not secured by perfection, but by presence. Emotional safety is created not through grand gestures, but through consistent moments of honesty, tenderness, and willingness to understand. In this environment, love becomes not just a feeling, but a powerful, healing force, one capable of transforming both partners from the inside out. Chapter 8. The Practice of Forgiveness and Repair. Forgiveness and repair are the quiet strengths that sustain a relationship over time. No matter how deep the love, no matter how aligned the values, two people will inevitably hurt each other. This is not a sign of failure. It is part of being human. We misunderstand, we react, we speak too quickly, we forget to listen, or we slip into old patterns. What defines the health of a relationship is not the absence of hurt, but the willingness to heal the hurt together. Forgiveness and repair make this possible. They turn moments of rupture into opportunities for deeper connection. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It is not the erasure of pain, nor is it the permission for harmful behavior to continue. Forgiveness is the choice to release resentment so the heart can remain open. Holding on to resentment may feel protective, but it slowly erodes intimacy. It clouds the present with the weight of past injuries. It builds walls instead of bridges. Forgiveness softens these walls and allows the relationship to breathe again. It does not mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing not to let the wound define the connection. Repair is the active part of forgiveness. It is the process by which partners restore trust and closeness after a rupture. Repair requires humility, the willingness to acknowledge our impact even when our intentions were not harmful. It also requires courage, because apologizing touches the vulnerable part of us that fears rejection or shame. Yet every sincere repair strengthens the relationship because it demonstrates commitment. It tells the other person, our connection matters more to me than my pride. Many people struggle with repair because apologizing can feel like admitting personal insufficiency. But an apology is not an admission of worthlessness. It is an acknowledgement of humanity. It is a recognition that our actions have effects, that we care about those effects, and that we want to restore harmony. When both partners can apologize freely, the relationship becomes a place where imperfection is accepted, where vulnerability is normal, and where healing is mutual. A sincere apology is specific. It does not minimize the other person's feelings or shift blame. It does not include defensiveness or justification. It simply acknowledges the impact. I can see how my words hurt you, or I understand that my reaction frightened you, or I didn't realize how important this was to you, and I'm sorry. These moments of clarity allow emotional truth to surface. When truth is shared with kindness, defensiveness dissolves. Forgiveness also requires understanding. To forgive, we must attempt to see the moment through the other person's eyes. We must recognize their stress, their fear, their misunderstanding, or their own wounds. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it contextualizes it. Understanding invites empathy, and empathy makes forgiveness possible. Without understanding, forgiveness feels forced. With understanding, forgiveness feels natural because the heart recognizes that the rupture came from pain, not malice. At the same time, forgiveness must not be rushed. Some hurts require time to settle. The nervous system needs space to process, and the heart needs time to reopen. Forgiveness, given prematurely, may feel like abandonment of self. True forgiveness arises when the heart feels ready, not when pressure is applied. A patient partner allows space for this process. They do not demand reconciliation, they invite it. Repair also involves rebuilding trust. Trust is not a static quality. It changes with experiences. Moments of rupture weaken trust, but moments of accountability strengthen it again. Trust is rebuilt through consistency, honesty, and transparency. Small acts matter. Following through on what we say, showing up when needed, and communicating openly. Over time, these actions show the nervous system that the relationship is reliable, even when difficult moments occur. Repair is not a one-time act, but a practice. Minor ruptures happen frequently. Misheard tone, unmet expectations, brief irritations. When these small ruptures are repaired quickly, the relationship remains strong. When they accumulate without acknowledgement, resentment grows silently. The best relationships are not the ones without conflict, but the ones that have learned to repair early and often. This practice builds resilience. Instead of fearing conflict, the partners trust that they can navigate it. Forgiveness also extends inward. Many people struggle to forgive their partner because they have not yet learned to forgive themselves. They carry shame from past mistakes or guilt from old experiences. This self-criticism makes them brittle. They struggle to accept apologies because their own internal world does not know what acceptance feels like. Self-forgiveness softens the heart so it can receive and give compassion more freely. When we treat our own imperfections with gentleness, we naturally extend that gentleness to the people we love. In relationships, forgiveness becomes easier when both partners understand that hurt is not evidence of incompatibility. Hurt simply means that two complex human beings are learning how to love each other. It means they are practicing presence, vulnerability, and communication, all of which challenge the ego. When we accept that conflict is natural, we stop fearing it. Instead, we see it as a chance to practice maturity, empathy, and honesty. Repair also strengthens intimacy because it deepens emotional knowledge. During a rupture, deeper truths often emerge. Fears that were hidden, needs that were unspoken, boundaries that were unclear. When these truths are shared openly, the relationship becomes more authentic. Both partners learn more about each other's inner world. This understanding forms a deeper bond, one built not on idealization but on reality. Intimacy grows when the relationship holds both the beautiful moments and the difficult ones. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring repeated harm. If a pattern continues despite efforts to address it, forgiveness must be paired with firm boundaries. The heart can remain compassionate while still insisting on respect and consistency. In adult relationships, love and boundaries are not opposites. They strengthen each other. Boundaries protect the space where forgiveness can occur. Forgiveness keeps the boundaries from turning into walls. Ultimately, forgiveness and repair transform love from something fragile into something resilient. A relationship that practices repair does not collapse at the first sign of difficulty. Instead, it becomes stronger over time because each challenge is met with honesty and care. The partners learn to trust not only each other, but the process of connection itself. Forgiveness is the healing of the past. Repair is the rebuilding of the present. Together, they create a future where love can deepen without fear. Chapter 9. Mature Love and Interdependence. Mature love is not the dramatic, stormy, or adrenaline-filled love that popular culture often idealizes. It is quieter, steadier, and deeper. It grows slowly, built through presence, responsibility, understanding, and choice. Mature love is not about losing oneself in another person, nor is it about rigid independence. Instead, it finds its strength in interdependence, the balance between togetherness and individuality, connection and autonomy, shared life and personal freedom. In this balance, two people become not halves of a whole, but whole individuals who choose to walk life side by side. Many people enter relationships with the belief that love means merging completely, that closeness requires giving up parts of oneself. They confuse attachment with dependency and autonomy with distance. Mature love dispels these misunderstandings. It recognizes that closeness thrives when each person feels free, and freedom thrives when each person feels securely connected. There is no need to cling because the bond is secure. There is no need to push away because individuality is respected. Interdependence is the middle path between enmeshment and emotional isolation. Enmeshment blurs boundaries until both partners lose their sense of self. Emotional isolation builds walls so high that no one can reach the heart. Interdependence, however, allows both people to remain themselves while trusting in the strength of their connection. It honors both we and I, understanding that a relationship is healthiest when both people bring their full selves into it. Mature love does not seek to control or to be controlled. It listens without trying to fix. It supports without taking over. It encourages growth rather than fearing it. The mature heart recognizes that love is not static. It evolves as two people evolve. When partners support each other's growth, the relationship becomes a place of expansion rather than limitation. When growth is feared, love becomes fragile, requiring constant reassurance and rigid predictability. A key aspect of mature love is emotional self-regulation. Instead of expecting a partner to manage all emotional discomfort, each person learns how to soothe themselves while remaining open to connection. This balance prevents the relationship from becoming a place of emotional burden or dependency. When both partners can hold their emotions with awareness, they can come together in conversations with clarity and respect. This emotional steadiness allows difficult moments to be navigated without losing the connection. Interdependence also involves the ability to ask for support without shame. Mature love does not idolize self-sufficiency. It recognizes that humans are wired for connection, that we thrive when we feel supported and understood. Asking for help, reassurance, or comfort does not diminish strength, it builds intimacy. What matters is the manner in which these needs are expressed, not with demand or desperation, but with honesty and openness. When needs are communicated clearly and respectfully, they can be met without resentment. In mature relationships, both partners become attuned to each other's rhythms. They notice when the other seems stressed, distant, overwhelmed, or quiet. This attunement is not mind reading or intrusion, it is empathy in action. They offer support without assuming responsibility, and they allow space without interpreting it as rejection. This delicate balance creates a relationship that feels both connected and spacious. Another hallmark of mature love is the acceptance of imperfection. Real relationships are built by imperfect people. Expectations of perfection, perfect communication, perfect emotional regulation, perfect understanding create pressure that no one can sustain. Mature love embraces the truth that mistakes will happen, misunderstandings will arise, and emotions will sometimes surge. What matters is the willingness to repair, learn, and grow. This acceptance creates emotional safety, allowing both partners to relax into authenticity. Interdependence also honors differences. In immature love, differences may feel threatening or destabilizing. One person may try to change the other to feel more secure. But in mature love, differences are seen as complementary rather than conflicting. Each partner brings unique perspectives, strengths, and ways of experiencing the world. These differences are not obstacles to overcome, but elements that enrich the relationship. Respecting differences is a sign of security, not incompatibility. Mature love values choice. It recognizes that love is not sustained by obligation, but by intention. Each day, each partner chooses to remain engaged, to communicate with honesty, to be present, and to support the relationship's growth. This ongoing choice gives the relationship vibrancy. It avoids the stagnation that arises when love becomes automatic or taken for granted. Choice turns partnership into a living process rather than a fixed label. Interdependence also fosters mutual empowerment. When one partner succeeds, the other feels genuinely happy, not threatened. When one grows, the other supports wholeheartedly. There is no competition because the relationship is seen as a shared home for both individuals flourishing. In this environment, each person rises, not at the expense of the other, but alongside them. Mature love becomes a force that expands both lives, offering encouragement, inspiration, and grounding. One of the most beautiful qualities of mature love is the ease that begins to develop over time. This ease is not laziness or complacency. It is the comfort that comes from knowing you are accepted, valued, and understood. It is the quiet confidence that comes from trust built slowly and steadily. This ease allows playfulness to re-emerge, even in adulthood. Laughter becomes more frequent, conversations become more open, and moments of silence become restful rather than tense. Interdependence also means allowing the relationship to be a place of rest. In a world that often demands constant productivity and performance, mature love becomes a sanctuary where both partners can lay down their emotional armor. It is a place where fatigue, sadness, joy, confusion, and hope can all be expressed without fear. This kind of emotional home sustains the heart through life's challenges. Finally, mature love recognizes that intimacy is a lifelong practice. It is not something we achieve once and maintain effortlessly. It deepens through presence, communication, boundaries, forgiveness, and shared vulnerability. It requires ongoing intention, but it rewards that intention with a depth of connection that superficial or reactive love can never offer. Interdependence is the art of being fully ourselves while being fully connected. It honors individuality while nurturing partnership. It balances closeness with freedom, stability with growth, vulnerability with strength. When two people practice mature love, the relationship becomes not a source of fear, but a source of expansion, an emotional landscape where two lives intertwine not out of need or obligation, but out of choice, trust, and heartfelt commitment. Chapter 10. The Spiritual Dimension of Loving. Every deep relationship eventually reveals a truth that goes beyond psychology, communication skills, and personal history. Beneath all the patterns, wounds, and growth lies something subtler and more profound, an unseen thread that weaves two lives together, shaping not only how they relate, but who they become. This is the spiritual dimension of loving. It is the understanding that love is not simply an emotion or a choice, but a way of being, a path of awakening, and a sacred meeting between two souls. The spiritual dimension of love begins with presence. When we truly see another person, beyond their words, their roles, their defenses, we touch something sacred within them. We glimpse their essence, the part of them untouched by fear or conditioning. This recognition creates a sense of reverence. We no longer see just a partner. We see a living being with a unique inner world, shaped by experiences, dreams, wounds, and mysteries. This seeing is spiritual because it moves beyond the surface into the realm of soul. Love becomes spiritual when we recognize that the relationship itself is a teacher. It mirrors the places where we are still closed and invites us to soften. It reflects the parts of us that long for healing and challenges us to grow. In this way, the relationship becomes a path, not always an easy path, but a meaningful one. Each moment of conflict, each moment of joy, each moment of vulnerability becomes a doorway to deeper awareness. The relationship reveals our unconscious patterns, our fears of vulnerability, our resistance to change, and our longing for connection. When we embrace these revelations, love transforms us. This transformation requires humility. The ego often believes it knows what love should look like, how a partner should behave, and how the relationship should unfold. But spiritual love asks us to surrender these rigid ideas. Instead of clinging to expectations, we learn to trust the unfolding. We discover that love is not something we control, but something we participate in. This surrender is not passive. It is a conscious choice to meet life with curiosity rather than certainty, openness rather than fear. The spiritual dimension of love also involves compassion. Compassion for our partner, compassion for ourselves, and compassion for the human journey. When we see our partner's wounds not as flaws, but as echoes of their past, our heart softens. When we see our own wounds with gentleness rather than judgment, healing begins. Compassion becomes the guiding force in moments of tension or misunderstanding. It reminds us that even in conflict, both people are seeking connection, safety, or understanding. Compassion turns struggle into opportunity and pain into growth. Another aspect of spiritual love is the recognition of impermanence. Everything, moods, circumstances, desires, fears, changes. The relationship will pass through phases, closeness and distance, harmony and tension, certainty and doubt. Spiritual love does not cling to a single moment or fear change. It understands that change is part of the natural flow of life. This acceptance brings peace because the relationship is no longer a desperate attempt to preserve stability, but a shared journey through shifting seasons. When partners embrace impermanence, they experience each moment more fully, knowing it is precious. Gratitude also deepens the spiritual dimension of love. Gratitude arises naturally when we notice the simple acts of care, the presence of a loving companion, the support offered in difficult times, the joy shared in small moments. Gratitude turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. It shifts the focus from what is missing to what is present, nurturing a sense of abundance rather than lack. When gratitude flows between partners, love becomes a source of nourishment rather than expectation. The spiritual dimension of love also invites us to see relationship as a practice of truth. Truth not only in communication, but in authenticity. To love spiritually means to bring our real self into the relationship, our hopes, fears, imperfections, and dreams. It means letting go of performance and allowing ourselves to be seen fully. This authenticity creates intimacy that cannot be manufactured. It is felt in silence as much as in conversation. Truth becomes the ground on which trust and connection grow. Forgiveness, too, belongs to the spiritual realm. When we forgive, we choose understanding over resentment, connection over distance. This does not deny pain. It honors it and then releases the grip it holds on the heart. Forgiveness is a spiritual act because it frees both partners. It clears the path for deeper connection and prevents old wounds from overshadowing the present. Spiritual love also recognizes the autonomy of each soul. It honors the fact that each person has their own path, purpose, and unfolding. Mature relationships allow each partner to grow in their own way, even when that growth leads them in unexpected directions. Spiritual love encourages self-discovery and supports the other's evolution, trusting that the bond will deepen when both people are aligned with their inner truth. The spiritual dimension of loving also involves moments of shared stillness, moments when partners are simply present together, without roles or expectations. These moments can be as simple as sitting quietly, holding hands, sharing a sunset, or lying together in the dark. In these moments, the mind rests and the heart speaks. A deep sense of connection arises, not from doing, but from being. Such moments remind us that love is not something we perform, but something we experience. At times, spiritual love asks us to stretch beyond our comfort zone. It may ask us to listen more deeply, speak more honestly, or face a fear we have avoided. It may ask us to soften when we want to harden or to open when we want to close. These moments of stretching are part of the spiritual path because they lead us closer to authentic connection. They teach us that love is not always easy, but it is always transformative when approached with awareness and intention. Ultimately, the spiritual dimension of loving is the recognition that love is bigger than the relationship itself. It is a force that invites us to become more compassionate, more present, more open-hearted, and more awake. It expands our awareness beyond personal desires into a shared sense of meaning. When partners embrace love as a spiritual practice, the relationship becomes an anchor, not because it avoids storms, but because it allows both people to navigate them with courage, honesty, and grace. Spiritual love is not about perfection. It is about depth. It is about choosing presence over fear, compassion over judgment, truth over illusion. It is about seeing the sacredness in the person before you and treating the relationship as a living, evolving expression of the heart. In this way, love becomes not only something we share, but something that transforms us, guiding us closer to wholeness. Conclusion. Throughout this journey, we have explored the 5 A's: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, as the essential gestures that sustain adult love. These qualities are not techniques or tools to manipulate outcomes. They are expressions of maturity, awareness, and compassion. When practiced consistently, they do not merely improve relationships, they transform them. They create a foundation strong enough to hold vulnerability, flexible enough to navigate disagreement, and alive enough to deepen connection over time. Integrating the 5 A's into daily life begins with intention. Love is not strengthened through occasional grand gestures, but through small, repeated acts of presence. Offering attention in the midst of distraction, accepting differences even when they frustrate us, appreciating the overlooked details of our partner's generosity, expressing affection with sincerity, and allowing space for individuality. These simple acts reshape the emotional climate of a relationship. They signal safety. They communicate value. They affirm that the relationship is not an obligation, but a chosen partnership. True integration happens through awareness. Each of the 5 A's invites us to stay conscious of how we show up. When we notice ourselves becoming impatient or reactive, we can pause and return to attention. When judgment arises, we can shift gently toward acceptance. When familiarity dulls our appreciation, we can look again with fresh eyes. When tension creates distance, we can offer tenderness. And when fear tempts us to control, we can instead allow space. These choices take practice, but with time, they become the natural language of love. Relationships, as we have seen, are powerful opportunities for growth. They are mirrors that reflect our unresolved wounds, our mature capacities, and everything in between. Each interaction reveals something: our tendencies to withdraw or pursue, our patterns of defense, our openness to change, our longing for connection. Rather than resisting what relationships reveal, we can approach these revelations with curiosity. Growth happens when we see our own reactions clearly and take responsibility for them. It happens when we listen deeply, speak honestly, and repair quickly. Relationships become a path of learning precisely because they awaken parts of us that solitude cannot reach. This growth is not about becoming perfect partners, but becoming conscious ones. Consciousness allows us to respond rather than react, to understand rather than assume, to love rather than defend. Through this awareness, conflict becomes a doorway rather than a threat. Disagreements become opportunities to understand each other's needs and fears. Vulnerability becomes a source of connection rather than danger. When we embrace relationships as growth paths, we stop seeking comfort alone. We start seeking truth, healing, and intimacy. Yet the deepest transformation comes when we learn to offer the 5 A's to ourselves. Many people seek in a partner what they have not yet learned to give inwardly. Attention is difficult when we ignore our feelings until they demand to be heard. Acceptance is difficult when we judge our own imperfections harshly. Appreciation is difficult when we overlook our strengths. Affection is difficult when we believe we must earn love. Allowing is difficult when we restrict ourselves with fear or self-criticism. When we withhold these qualities from ourselves, we inevitably cling to others to fill the gap. Self-giving is not selfish, it is necessary. When we treat ourselves with attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, we become emotionally grounded. We stop demanding that others heal our wounds or validate our worth. Instead, we meet ourselves with compassion and bring that steadiness into our relationships. We love from abundance, not scarcity. We connect without losing ourselves. We give freely because we are not giving from depletion. Becoming the source of the 5 A's for oneself also makes it possible to recognize when a relationship is nurturing or draining. Self-awareness sharpens discernment. When we honor our needs with clarity, we no longer tolerate situations that diminish us. We seek relationships that reflect our growth, not our wounds. This self-sufficiency does not isolate us. It allows us to choose connection from a place of integrity rather than fear. As we move forward into relationships, with ourselves and with others, what matters most is maturity, clarity, and love. Maturity helps us navigate challenges with steadiness. Clarity helps us communicate with honesty and listen with openness. Love helps us soften where the ego wants to harden. These qualities do not eliminate difficulties. They make difficulties navigable. They allow us to trust that connection is worth the effort, that healing is possible, and that growth is always available. The journey of adult relationship is not one we complete. It is one we practice. It unfolds moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. Some days we show up with tenderness. Other days we fall into old patterns. Yet even on difficult days, the intention to love with awareness keeps us aligned. The 5 A's guide us back to presence again and again. They help us speak truth without harm, hold boundaries without closing our hearts, and create a love that is both grounded and expansive. In the end, what we offer and what we receive become reflections of who we are becoming. When we give the 5 A's freely, we become more compassionate. When we receive them with openness, we become more trusting. When we practice them consistently, we create relationships that support growth, healing, intimacy, and inner freedom. Love becomes not only the bond between two people, but the expression of our deepest humanity. Moving forward, may you bring the 5 A's into each moment, with your partner, with the world, and with yourself. May your relationships be places of truth and tenderness. May your growth be steady and courageous. And may your love continue to mature into something clear, deep, and beautifully alive.